I pulled you up. If not, I
It's
can put you
Friday.
back down.
Friday was
Welcome
supposed
to
to
the
be
new
9.
age.
If you want to come to the Friday class, you can. That's cool.
No, I'm here right now. I was expecting it to be I'm in the middle of a match because I thought it was a 9 and not an 8. To be honest, I don't know why.
Well, reading comprehension is difficult.
General knowledge 100. That's what we're here for. All right, so no big deal. Just finish your match and listen along. I mean, it's not too hard of an effort. Walk and chew gum, as they say, right? Here's what we got going on. So I'm going to go to slide 2. Today we're going to talk about training goals. We do have a guest speaker lined up for Friday, so I'd encourage you all, if you're here tonight and you can make it Friday around 9 o'clock, we're going to have Lord Zath come in and talk about his replay theater and some other things that he has seen, observations throughout the game, because he's streamed a lot of competitive play and he's witnessed a lot of dumb decisions. So I think he'll be a great person for you all to hear from and possibly even ask questions to and kind of interact with a little bit. That's one of the things he'll be doing. We're also going to discuss the read ahead material from Jammin' 411 and Wild's Replay Theater. Good stuff. We'll talk a little about sources, useful links, and then we're going to translate why general knowledge is so important to the competitive environment and how it benefits you. And then lastly, we'll do an exercise. The exercise, though, is going to be up to your mentors on when you guys go ahead and execute it. I know I won't be doing it tonight because I've got other plans after this class. But each mentor may have a different timeline for you. All right, so going on to slide 3. This is our training goals. Yes, we're going to make you really smart. Good. I'll give you guys a minute to read over. I'm going to be monitoring the classroom channel. If you have something you'd like to say, because we have a lot of people in here and we're going to be discussing a lot of things, which we're going to draw elicit responses from you, just mark an X in the classroom channel when you want to speak, and one of the mentors will call on you so that we don't have 3 people trying to talk at once.
There is the comment feature.
Yeah? So we'll go ahead and mark an X in the classroom, and that will be how you are going to be identified for speaking. All right. So I hope you all watched the Jammin' 411 video. It's a little older, and that was intentional, because I'm trying to make a point about what we all assume is general knowledge about the game. We all know that if you show your broadside, you're going to eat sits. You know, if you think you can go bow on against IFHE, you're usually just going to get burned alive and chewed up. There's a lot of little things, though, that change over time. And to be quite frank, general knowledge is always growing. As the game releases new lines, new information, new experiences, as these new things come into play, you all have to be able to adapt to that, bring that into your repertoire, and understand what those mechanics are. The Jammin' 411 video is a little older, and that was... Geez, Shroof. It's a little older, and it provides, what people thought was okay 2 years ago. Now, the video itself is rather interesting, and we're going to go through that. So is there anyone here that took notes and what they thought could have been done a little differently in that video? Just some general knowledge notes?
I have 3 things.
Okay, fire away.
He showed too much broadside, he got away with it because nobody paid attention on the enemy team. He fired too much AP at ships that he should have been firing HE at. And he never used his Hydro once. I get that back then torps were short range as shit. But when a destroyer pops up like 5 kilometers from you, broadside to you, you should be expecting some kind of torps.
All right, fair points. Hans, you're next. What do you got?
So this is a bit of I don't know what the commentator was thinking, but he was mentioning that it could be the Coral Series torps, but as far as I know, they were only 6 kilometers, and I'm pretty sure like they were at half the map at that point, and pretty sure half the map is not 6 kilometers. So I don't know what the commentator was thinking, but As for the player himself, he fired a lot of AP, and I understand that German cruisers didn't have a quarter pen at that time. But against a Balon BB like that New York, I don't really think you should be firing AP.
Yeah, I'm.
As well as
Go
he was his positioning was pretty suboptimal. He was like right like over like sailing into the border at some points. And yeah, that's about
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that. Jamin did not know necessarily the specifications of the ships he was talking about. There's a little background with him. I used to watch him when I was first learning to play the game because his videos are done live. He doesn't pre-record them or pre-watch them. So oftentimes he gets things messed up, but that's kind of that in that moment feeling. And I kind of want you guys to see that. All right, Alba, what do you got?
On top of what the other people said, I noticed that he was a top tier ship, and he kept himself out of the battle for quite a bit by staying at max range and firing HE, which I know Nuremberg is Nuremberg right now. Königsberg is a fragile ship, and you don't get too close, but he's tier 5, and the biggest threat is at Wyoming, so he probably should have been a little bit closer and used HE more than AP.
Okay.
He probably
Skier?
should have, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And when he was fighting the Nuremberg at the other Königsberg at the end, that would have been a great opportunity to pop Hydro because the other one was probably going to send Torps, and he didn't then.
Yeah, he almost ate one of those torps at the end. It's a good catch. Skier?
So something that hasn't been said is that he missed a lot of information that the game threw at him. For example, there was a battleship reversing and he fired in front of it. And that was very obvious because of the smokestacks. And I think the commentator even caught it and pointed it. And then he also knocked out the engine. I think it was on the Königsberg he was firing at, and then proceeded to give it full lead, even though he saw the little engine hit that you get, when you do the damage number, and then it shows you the thing you knock out. And you could see the fire coming out of the smokestacks as well. And there was a few instances of that where there were ships with engines out that he just failed to recognize the loss of speed. Stuff like that. It's just not reading UI, not understanding the cues the game's giving you. That was my big pickup on top of the, accuracy stuff like that.
Good points. Embed.
So, kind of what some other people said about him like misleading his shots and stuff. He also like wasn't that focused on the mini map, so he could have eaten a lot more shells than he did by turning like when he turned to get his guns on the destroyer faster. When it popped up, that Königsberg that was firing at him could have gone AP and almost deleted him, but he either missed or didn't fire.
Yeah, he got away with a lot that game. And that he got a lucky. I call it a lucky game. I wouldn't call it a good game. It was a very lucky. All right, Erie, what do you got?
He's not big on actually maneuvering when people shoot at him. It's only when nothing's not shooting at him that he's wagging his ass a lot. He's not big on throttle control either that I've noticed. He's either full speed or it's the start of the match.
Yep.
And his focus fire is bloody atrocious aside from his atrocious aim. That Karlsruhe should have died like 3 salvos before he finally actually killed him. Why are you switching fire? That thing's right there. It's low health, it's broadside, its engine's out. Just freaking kill it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I thought there was a moment when he was exchanging with the, I think it was the other Königsberg late in the match, and he started chain firing his guns. I don't know about that decision either because you have such a quick reload. Anyways, Chief.
There's one thing I did remember that I wanted to point out. So 4 minutes into the match, he's got 12 hits. I don't know much about the Königsberg or whatever, but I know that as a top tier cruiser, you should have more hits than that and way more damage than that 4 minutes into the game. And also, I noticed, I understand it's like tier 4, 5, but he should have finished the game with more than like 50, 60k damage, especially being top tier.
Any mentors want to speak to that real quick?
I can.
Go ahead, Resker.
All right, so as for the damage, 50-60k at a tier 5 isn't terrible. I mean, it's over twice his health, which certainly says something. He did damage to a destroyer, which is way more important than damage to battleships. As for getting closer, more aggressive, even up to the 4-minute point, sometimes the best strategy is literally spend the first 5 minutes of the match surviving. Let the ships on both sides whittle each other down and be more effective later on. Sometimes you can't, especially in ships like Königsberg, which are super fragile. Exposing yourself too early means a lot of people are going to be shooting at you, and that's just something that ship cannot handle. So surviving a little bit longer before becoming effective is sometimes the most effective strategy.
When you're done, I got something to say as well.
Sure.
So I started playing personally in like January of 2016. World of Warships at this time was a little different, just a little undernote. So you do see that he has a damage indicator on the top left corner, but that is not part of the game. That was actually a mod. Back then you didn't have an original damage indicator. So may not necessarily apply to this guy, but back then you couldn't really tell how much damage you were doing besides a guesstimation without adding mods. You can't even estimate in terms of the hits either. When I was playing, I just didn't really pay attention to the damage numbers, so you may not even necessarily know if you're doing well or not. Or if you see what is a low damage number for the time, it may not necessarily be low, or it may be low now, but it was not low back then. Because back then, everyone was kind of new at the time. You're still trying to learn the game. I think that also go back into the part like there were so many ships going broadside, not much angling, no throttling, no turning. I feel like it was just it was kind of in its infancy, and there were not too many strats at the time to have you survive longer. And also, I'd say the aim was not as good either, just in general. I feel like today you cannot get away with a lot of stuff I saw in that video.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and that actually goes back to general knowledge and how people have kind of taken that general knowledge over the past few years, and a lot of people have used it to their benefit, which makes things harder for the rest of us.
Oh, yeah,
all right, I think
you can skip me. That was my ex actually. But...
Okay, so we'll go ahead and Chief, do you have anything else you want to add to that, or can I go to the next?
He needs to farm fires better.
Yeah, I can agree with that. All right, Hans, you're up.
So this dude was tunnel visioning a lot. So he's engaging enemy cruisers at like max range while sailing at the border. So that indicates that he's like not paying attention to where he's sailing. His engagements could have been much better, and he also didn't have like a lot of general game knowledge as shown in the brawl that happened before the game ended, where he's firing widespread torps, not using hydro. He's sailing broadside at like sub, what was it, 5 kilometers to another Königsberg. And he's leading broken engine ship, the same as some one who's has full engine power. That just indicates like general lack of knowledge of the game, as well as like again spamming AP. That's been said already, but yeah, that's about it.
Well, I mean, you got a hot mic.
Oh, I do. Oh.
All right, Caboose, what do you got?
Just with regards to his aim, like I've seen a lot of people do this, especially new players. Every time he was aimed, he was zoomed in fully, and especially at long range when they're moving at full speed, it's really hard to lead that. So if you zoom out, first off, you get better view of things around it, and you can also use the ticks better to judge this.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. You don't hear that one very often. Munch Tiger, what do you?
So I think most of my points have already been mentioned, but let me look here. These are not just at his player, but also the commentary, and I hope these haven't been mentioned. Anyway, there's at one point when there's 6 torpedoes coming at him. The commentator says, "Oh, maybe that is the Clemson." No, it cannot be. That is the Minakaze. There are 3 sets of 2. Know what torpedoes stacks are coming at you. If you have tier 10 clan battles game, you have 3 sets of 4 coming at you. That can only be one thing, and it's not a Shimakaze. It's the Somers. The Minakase manages to cut all team vision because he dunks out smoke, just blinding his own team. Don't do that. That's fucking stupid. The whole game was. I didn't think he had any impact at any point. He was randomly slinging shots, and they won anyway. Like what he did had very little impact. But mid 2/3 into the game, he is ineffectively shooting at Königsberg. He has the Minakase pop up really close. Does he turn over to shoot the Minakase? No, he ignores it. If that Minakase had been good, he'd been dead, and the game would have been lost maybe. But instead, he was plinking with it to Königsberg. Shoot targets that matter.
Okay.
That's all my bitching.
No, that makes sense. Syntax, what do you got?
Something small, but I think it's kind of like what everyone else has said. But every time the dude got in any type of fight, he treated it like it was a Renaissance era naval engagement where he just went full broadside, just tried to just start trading salvos. And every time that he did it, it just made me die. Cause like he was maximizing his silhouette against the opponent, just giving them as much of a target to hit. Even if it was just HE only, he was still. It's so much more difficult to hit something that's like using the maximum angle, like a gun arcs. But every chance he could get, he showed maximum side, and just made it the easiest shot in the world. But luckily, he was playing tier 5 game, so.
Yeah, he got away with it. I think this was, if I remember correctly, this was prior to the Königsberg getting the buff to having the 360 turrets, which kind of helped out later on. Resker,
That has been mentioned, yes.
All right. So one thing I'm going to do here is a bit of a rebuttal for. I know I heard it before the meeting started and after the AP thing, how he fired too much AP. Don't fire AP at battleships, especially when they're angled, all that kind of stuff. One thing I would say under the general knowledge banner is AP is surprisingly effective in situations you don't normally expect. It's not necessarily the wrong choice of ammo in certain situations. Like when he was long range firing AP at a battleship, he was long enough range that if you noticed, his plunging fire was making him do more damage than he was doing with HE. There were a couple cases too where he was able to get AP up into the superstructure, which can cause significant damage as well, especially with the lower penetration and the large superstructure of these ships. Was he doing that on purpose? Highly doubtful. Was it effective? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so that's another great point. This was probably, I want to say this was before IFHE was introduced as well, and prior to Germany having 1/4 pens, and he was using small caliber guns, which means fire chances were really low for German ships. So that could explain a little more of the AP usage. But again, that's general knowledge that was important to know then, may not be so important now. That's a point I'm trying to make here. All right, Nelson, what do you got?
Just a couple of things. His positioning again, wasn't too impressed by it. There was a bunch of violence center. He wasn't even looking at that. It was just being max distance, just doing full circles, doing nothing. On the flip side though, that did help him do something that I'm very bad at, which is conserving HP, and that let him just charge in, get some damage in the end, and well, he was more useful during the last few minutes of the game than the first 15 minutes of the game. So just that.
Good point. Hans, one more, and then Uber, I'm going to have you close this out, and then we'll move on for the rest of the class.
In regards to what Riskard was saying, yeah, at some points it was better to fire AP as there was like a couple of moments where there was like a reversing broadside cruiser and he was attempting to citadel them with low success because of his aim. But points like at the brawl where there's a bow and Königsberg rushing him, I do think that HE would have been the better choice at that scenario and in many other scenarios during the video, instead of just like hardcore AP spamming or poor ammo choice overall.
Good points. All right, Uber, you're up.
All right. Yeah, Hans said something about the AP usage. Long range is it becomes very ship specific real quick on questionable AP usage. So I won't go into too much detail on that. But fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. God, fuck.
You have spreadsheets, don't you, that covers this kind of stuff?
Well, that's just something that comes with playing the game a lot, honestly.
Oh, so you're saying
Oh,
experience matters. Go ahead.
I was gonna say kind of a soft rebuttal to Caboose's point on zooming. Yes and no. It becomes kind of ship specific. On the Königsberg, I wouldn't. You're not going to be shooting it. Well, yeah, at tier 5 at Königsberg guns, you're not going to be shooting any ships that are fast enough to exceed your view distance or in the maximum view point. Now zooming out 1 or maybe 2 ticks is fine. Some people like to play on the first zoom, which is wrong in my opinion. But anyway, but yeah, so
Holy
there are some
galaxy
ships
brain.
like if you're a minnow shooting at a cob or something, and you can zoom out 1 or 2 ticks and zoom or put the ship all the way on the one side of your reticle, and that's how you hit. But anyway,
All right.
that's all I got.
Go ahead.
No, that's it.
So I think I want to close this introduction video out by saying, if you guys are taking one of your clan battles as a clan and doing what we just did with this video and dissecting it, you'll often find why you failed or succeeded as a team. It doesn't always have to be looking at a bad game. You can look at a good game too to see what you all did right. I mean, what was causing everything to sync together can sometimes be just as effective as looking at what made everything fall apart. So that was a good analysis, and I appreciate all the input from everyone. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. So this is kind of a, 3 basic questions here. What is a source? How do you know it is reliable? And how confident are you in your knowledge of the game? So a source being a place, person, or thing from which something comes or can be obtained. That's the definition of it. There are lots of sources in World of Warships, and some of them are good, some of them are not good, and some are somewhere in between. And it's up to you to determine the reliability of that. And believe it or not, the devs, in their infinite wisdom, are not always the best sources, which is great. When they tell you something's balanced and you know it's not, that's a prime example of them, throwing out bad data, arbitrarily discounting 10% of the population or something like that to meet their, game selling point. So you have to understand why they're throwing biases, and there's other things involved there. The last question there, how confident are you in your knowledge of the game? General knowledge is actually extremely important. We just had the Italian line release. We just had the French DD line release. And I'll be honest with you, I don't feel very comfortable with my knowledge of those ships yet, which is why I've been grinding the Italian line the old-fashioned way, nice and slow, to better understand how SAP works, understand how the French ships work with their reload booster and how they can, dodge maneuver. And there's a lot of interesting aspects. I was quite frankly surprised at how powerful the SAP is against destroyers when I'm getting, 9, 10K damage salvos from a tier 8 ship against another tier 8 destroyer. That's devastating, especially early in a match. So just think about that as you're going through this and as you're playing the game, because I'll tell you, the more battles you have in randoms, they will make a difference in your competitive experience. We asked you questions. How many? What is your primary ship? How many random battles do you have in it? And I'm telling you, if you have less than 20, 30 battles in your primary ship and you're using it competitively, you're probably doing something wrong because you don't have the knowledge of your own ship to even play it. There's this wonderful guy out there called Sun Tzu. He wrote this thing called The Art of War. It says if you don't know yourself, you're screwed. So I recommend getting more comfortable with your ships and playing them in random battles. I know that's a pain for some people, and it's not always something we relish, especially on the weekends, but it will make you a better player in competitive play when you understand, hey, if I can shoot at this angle with this ship on that ship, I can still get a citadel. Things like that matter. All right, we're going to jump down to slide 5.
Poor
All
Yamato
right.
getting mentioned.
I'm sorry, what?
Poor Yamato getting picked on for the angle there.
Yeah, exactly. So I do plan on having a guest speaker who's probably going to talk a little more in depth this, but right now I want to kind of turn the floor over to Phantom. I kind of put him on the spot here a few minutes ago, and I want him to kind of talk about WoW's Wikipedia and whether it's a good source, great source. He's one of our wonderful wiki editors. So Phantom, the floor is yours.
All right. I also want to point out that Embedded Deer is also a wiki editor as of a couple weeks ago.
Hooray!
Now
So
fix
yeah.
AA values.
So yeah, the wiki, if you've looked at it recently in like the past couple of months, you'll probably realize that some of the things are kind of wrong on there. Part of that is, and this is where it comes into what Congo's saying with how reliable of a source it is. You have to be careful with the stats it shows because it's pulling from the Wargaming API, and that's up to the Russian developers to fix. And with the recent CV changes, especially in terms of AA, it hasn't been updated in the API yet, so the wiki isn't pulling the proper stats. But most of the other stats for ships are, I'm fairly certain, are quite accurate. So if you're ever looking for the range of what a ship's range is, how fast it goes, turning radii and stuff, it should be correct, at least as far as what's shown in port. If you've been paying attention to the forums at all, you'll see that little white mouse has proven that turning radii aren't always correct in between the game and what's written in port and what's actually done in a battle, which also brings into question whether or not the game itself is accurate. As for the wiki itself, it's maintained mostly by players. There's about a dozen of us who write most of the ship pages and mechanic pages, and we try and remain as objective as possible in our writing. So, for example, actually, probably not a good example. The Italian cruiser line, we haven't really gone around to updating it yet, but currently Venezia has been updated. So if you want to take a look at that page, you can. I personally wrote the performance guide for it. So if you have any issues with it, bring it to me. But we try and keep it as objective as possible. We try not to be influenced by what the CCs say about specific ships and whether or not they like it. We try and make our own opinions of it. We discuss among ourselves. About half our team is Unicum or above, and the other half is about average and maybe one or two below average players. So we try and get a pretty good range of player opinion on how to accurately play a ship to the best of its abilities and how it can be played in the hands of a good player versus a bad player. So in terms of accuracy, yes, the wiki can be accurate, but you should also take it with a grain of salt.
I'd also like to point out that
Yeah, go ahead.
some of the older pages, this is what I've been working on mainly, is when new ships come out and like you'll say, oh, this ship is the fastest at its tier or something like that. And then a new ship comes out and it's no longer accurate because it's outdated from when the page was written compared to what it actually is now. So sometimes there is some like minor errors.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of everything that we or other people entirely wrote on some of these older pages. So the newer pages are probably a lot more accurate.
Or when the the Conqueror still says it has 457 millimeter guns.
Yeah. Oh well, some of the stuff on like the sidebar in terms of like what it can be armed with, that's not us. We can't fix that. But if it says anything like the pros or cons about like can mount 457 guns, and yeah, I should probably change that.
I already went through and changed that.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and the wiki is open to anyone with over 100 battles to edit. So if you see an error on there, you can feel free to go in there and make the change yourself. We do patrol the wiki, we patrol the changes. So if someone goes in there and says, this ship is shit, which has happened before, we usually catch it within a day or so and remove it. So if you write anything, again, try and remain as objective as possible in what you say. But we welcome any and all changes. So as long as they're like not bad. So not all changes.
That's a good review, Phantom. Thank you very much. So going on down the list, clan members, are they reliable sources? I'm just going to kind of leave this one open and let a few people chime in here.
Chief's not.
All right, Hans, go ahead.
Honestly, when I'm looking at a mentor, I generally look at their competitive experience and I guess to an extent like how they play, so that if they're reliable or not with their performance in a competitive setting and a random setting as well, so you can kind of like get an idea of how good they might be objectively.
Yeah, I know a lot of you patrol the discords, the forums, the reddits, and everything else, and you take a lot of advice from other unicoms outside of our clan. I'll just leave it like that. And I'm fine with it. Just understand, everyone's got their own style and play, and what they're telling you that works for them may not be what works for you as an individual player, because they might be playing at a level well beyond yours. And when they say, yeah, I can, and I'll use myself as an example. When I say, yeah, I can run a daring and competitive with AP only and not have IFHE on it because I want to maximize survivability, that works for me. It may not work for you or your team. So you kind of have to balance your decisions based off what your team needs.
What I like to say is there's training like training steps. There's steps that you attain certain periods of knowledge that you can combine together. Say something like saturation mechanics and stuff. You learn to use those tools over time, and you're not going to be able to use it advanced wise, because then you have how would I say missing information viable to keeping something like that, like saturation, going down to a third of health to use the saturation mechanics advanced way can be good, but you also have to take in your certain situation at hand to even effectively use that. Say, like, if you're fighting a battleship that can citadel you once, you'll probably die. But if you're trying to use saturation, then it might be a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there was a video made, I want to say a year or two ago when the minnow first came out. This guy played the Yamato in a training battle and got chased by like a dozen minnows, and he got so saturated he couldn't take damage in his stern anymore.
Oh yeah, that's a big.
Yeah.
I can link that video if you want.
It's a great video to watch to learn about how saturation mechanics work and how you can literally work or game the game to its maximum effectiveness in your benefit. Restrid, you had something.
Yeah, sorry, what was Hans brought up a point. I'm just trying to remember because there was two things that came up between then, and I have a short.
I said that I look at like their random performance as well as their competitive
Right.
experience.
All right, I understand now. So the issue I was basically bringing up here is a lot like Congo was saying, how certain people have different styles and everything. It's important that when you're asking for advice, you understand a little bit about that person's style, but most importantly, you understand essentially what you understand about the ship class and what they understand about the ship class. For instance, I'm pretty good in a lot of ships. You look at my destroyer play. Oh, I've got great stats. Don't ask me about torpedoing people. I can't do it. But everyone's going to have that little quirk about them that they're really strong in this area, really weak in this area. If you go ask someone like me, for instance, you ask, "Oh, how do you drive Clever?" My answer is just going to be go fast, shoot guns, because honestly, that's all I really think about when I'm driving that ship. Yeah, there's a lot more to it. So if you ever get an answer that's not a full answer, ask for clarification. Hey, in this situation, what do you think? Or hey, can you just go more into depth? I'm having trouble when I get into this kind of a situation. Or because a lot of times we're not thinking about that all the time. It's just straight up, like I said, go fast, shoot guns. It's instinctual because we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know when I'm driving Clever, I try to find as many torpedoes as possible and just eat all of them at once. Shrew, what do you?
So, what I have posted in the classroom is something that you all should know of, and I'm sure many of you do, but if you do not, I recommend them. It is a 20 episode long playlist that World of Warships themselves made to go over game basics and how specific systems in the game work. Now, some of the things that Wargaming says in these videos can end up being a little bit questionable, but 90% of the content in all of those videos is extremely helpful. When those videos came out, I was already a Unicum player, but even I had something to learn from them. Especially, and one thing I want to point out specifically is the spotting systems video. If you think you know how spotting works exactly, doesn't matter, you should watch those videos anyway. You need to watch the saturation videos, and the rest aren't so important, but they should be watched anyway. Now, another thing is when it comes to community contributors, streamers, etc., and stuff like that, we've talked about this before. Some are better than others. Like, you don't necessarily want to be getting that much of your information from not Sir, I'm sure you know, who recommends IFHE on DM because it feels better. Some players are more trustworthy than others. Flambass, while toxic to his teammates, can sometimes be a decent person to learn from when it comes to his general knowledge. But remember, if you want to know something and you hear something from a community contributor and you're not sure, feel free to ask somebody else instead of taking their word at face, because everybody's going to have a different idea of how things work, and taking in another opinion and seeing, do you agree with this, can always be helpful.
Yeah, that's all great points, and it kind of speaks to where I was going with this next is the World of Warships Naval Academy, which you actually just pinned to the classroom, is perfect. The community contributors, which I have listed in the next slide down, a couple of them that I recommend. I'll go why each one. The forums, Reddit, and dev blogs, I would be very careful about what you take off of those. Make sure it's a player you know, number one. And number two, ask for a second opinion or ask them to provide a source of where they're linking their information from, because there's all sorts of toxic stupidity on the forums, on the dev blogs, on the Reddit, and some of it's even being propagated by wargaming staff who just don't realize what the meta is right now and how bad it is. I mean, just look at competitive with Russian ships. It's
Clever is
disgusting. Too. Perfectly fine. No issues needed. Another great site I put on there is WoW's Numbers. I think that's going to be a solid pick. That's just for general data. If you're looking for, what ship is performing well. I always tell people, use good. Actually, no. I'm going to backtrack here. I used to play a game called Magic the Gathering. It's a card game, so you probably heard of it once or twice. I used to be in the competitive leagues with it. I was very, very good at it. And one of the things that was the biggest thing, I bought this book by one of the pro players on one of the pro tours, and he said, use good cards. That was his number one piece of advice. In this instance, that translates to use good ships. They always say seal clubbers and unicoms out there using really good ships and pay to win and blah. Well, if it gets you a win, it certainly beats the alternative. And when it comes to competitive play, that's huge.
I think.
Go ahead.
Mind if I piggyback on that? A good indication of that was old Azumo. No matter who you were, you are guaranteed 6% reduction in your win rate in just that ship. just the existence of that ship is a 6% reduction into your possible win rate. So if you were a 70%er, you'd be 63%er.
No, tell me about it.
Or
we already know.
Of course, these days it's actually
it's
stronger
better
ships.
now. It's better now. But if you took it from the old data, it was like, just don't play it.
Oh yeah.
Also, I just linked. I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here. I just linked a site, WoW's FT. Without a doubt, by far, not even close, the greatest resource for this game you could ever have.
Unfortunately, when it comes to WoW's FT, the creator will be taking it down within a few months, so make sure you get as much use out of it as you can now.
But
he changed his mind again?
But why?
Did he? I didn't. I
He
thought
will
was
be.
gonna keep
I
it.
saw a post on him from Reddit. I don't know when exactly, but it will happen.
Because of the NTC stuff, he was like, I'm going to take it down because of that. Then they changed the NTC stuff, so he's like, okay.
I forget why, but
Anyway,
he has his reasons.
It's got data mined information for every ship. I mean, everything you could want, or almost everything you could want to know about any ship. You could spend a year on there and not learn everything. But it's very helpful, and it's also has build functions, which is very helpful. There is one missing piece. He was the flags bonuses calculator is has not been working for a long time. So if you build a ship, and you can also look up the flag values and characteristics and add those in. You'd have to add those in yourself later for the final numbers. But anyway, it's a very helpful tool to build ships with. Also,
That's. I'm really glad you just mentioned that, Uber. It's something I forgot to talk about. Is the signal flags. We often know about the ships and what they can do. We forget about the captains, the modules, the ship flags and signals, and how they can transform a ship into something completely different. Really great. We're going to go ahead and go down to slide 6, and I'll kind of go over that. Notice how I have the useful links italicized, because what may be useful to me may not be useful to you. I'm going to kind of briefly go over each one of these. WoW's members for me is a statistics page. Obviously, the worldofwarships.com main page that gives you news, updates, upcoming ship lines. Ship Comrade, if you haven't heard of that before, it is a great website. It covers all of the leaderboards, and you can go in there and look up who has the #1 shell hits. It doesn't look up just damage or PR. It can cover a variety of topics. So really cool. I couldn't find a King of the Seas for .NA, but there is the .eu one, so that's the one I linked. Lord Zath, I specifically highlight him because he does his usually weekly. He's on the road right now, which is why he wasn't available tonight. He's actually overseas. He's going to be around Friday night. But he does his replay theater, and he will go through. If you want to send him a video for analysis, you want an opinion outside of Cuter, he will go through and he will nitpick the hell out of your video, and he will make you feel really small. He's done it to me several times, but I always appreciate it because it's always good to have someone else, that second set of eyes. He'll look at your signals. He'll look at your turning. He'll look at where your map positioning, and he'll call you on it live in front of everyone. So, you got to have a little bit of thick skin for it. But if you go watch some of his videos, they're really good. They're really in depth, which is why I recommend him. Flambass, obviously, he's kind of been talked to. He's a little bit toxic. But, man, if you are learning how to aim, he's pretty good at aiming at stuff. And he plays battleships a lot and cruisers. So, even though he's really more of a universalist, he's fun to watch. The WoW's Wiki, of course, I got that linked in there. The forums, occasionally there's good stuff on there. I know Little White Mouse puts the turning radiuses of ships and stuff like that on there every now and again. WoW's Reddit, you'll see Shroof on there. Another community contributor you may not have heard of is Business 6. He's a really good player. He does use a lot of mods. I don't think any of them are banned, but people have called him out on it in the past. But one of the things I like that he does is he does ships and giggles. And he is no nonsense. He's really harsh on himself, and he calls himself out when he makes a bad play. But he has a lot of interesting stuff. Obviously, if you're into using mod packs, Aslan's is great, and they can really benefit your team. And then there's the WoW's Tactics page. I really, really hope that by now, all of you have found a way to the WoW's Tactics page. But if you haven't, there's the link. Go on there, mess around with it with your team. If you want, take one of your clan battles nights and just say, hey, guys, we're not going to play clan battles tonight. We're going to take 2 hours and war game, what we think we should be doing, And I'll cover it in a later class more in the tactics and strategy, but you got to have phases beyond just the initial positioning. Because a lot of times, that first 2 minutes, hey, you're going to go to D6, you're going to go to G4. Okay. At the 18-minute mark, then what? There's a lot more that goes on to it. And speaking of which, I'll throw myself under a bus. I got told to go to an island last night. I went to the island, but I didn't know what to do after that because I had never played the ship I was in on the map for that counter strat. And sure enough, I turned the corner and ate a bunch of torpedoes and died like an idiot. Much to the chagrin of our team, right? Is that how it went, Uber? Was it bad?
It was bad.
Yeah, it was ugly.
Wait, were you doing the was that on North?
Yeah, we were the self-spawn. Yeah, it was ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a casual observer, it was.
Who streams for Cuter?
Usually
M3.
true for M3.
Almost always M3.
All right, so moving. Oh, go ahead.
Or just pop in. Probably one of us can Discord stream it if needed.
Yeah.
All right. So I hope those links can help you out, and I do recommend you kind of dig into some of those guys. I usually go on once or twice a week, especially if I'm bored at work. Obviously I'm at school now where I can't really play around on computers, but if you have time, take 20 minutes during your lunch hour or something and pop up one of those videos, especially Business 6, and it's pretty interesting stuff. Rusker, did you have something you want to say?
I was just gonna say I still got pretty much all of our old tactics. If you need any examples or anything, I have no problem sharing them because they are all from Dead Clans. So
there you go. Also, Rusker, you have access to Cuter Docs. I believe you made a guidebook on how to Citadel people. And I think that speaks to general knowledge, like knowing where to Citadel, like the gross occur first, if you're going to try for it. Like, you know,
I made a whole analysis and battleship guide on all the battleships, how to fight them and how to play them, but not all of them. I missed 2 of them, but that was like a year and a half ago. So some of it is outdated, but there is still a lot of good information in there. I will dig that up and post.
Yeah, we can probably put that in the classroom and then pin it for other folks. All right, moving on to slide 7. Yeah, moving on to slide 7. I have some questions here. If anyone wants to chime in on any of these questions and responses, that's fine, but it's really trying to get you to think of how do you take this general knowledge that we're kind of trying to talk about here tonight and apply it to improving your competitive play. You know, are you comfortable with the maps? Do you understand the difference between a small map, a medium map, a large map? Are you comfortable with the meta? If your team sees 4 cleavers, do you just say, hey, we're just going to throw this game because PvP and they're better than us? Or are you going to try and fight all the way to the end? There's things like that that you need to be thinking about. Hey, we should have a strategy, a counter for everything, and we're going to try our damnedest till the very end to win this game. Are you comfortable with your ship selection? You know yourself. Are you comfortable with your opponent's ship selection? You know, you understand what their capabilities are. If someone has, you know, the new Venezia, was it Venezia, the Italian tier 10, are you comfortable in the DD going anywhere near it, especially if there's a radar ship close by? I sure as hell not. But, you know, that's something you need to be aware of. If you get exposed, you're probably going to lose half your health in one salvo. And then, of course, you know, understanding the ship lines, the types, the national flavors, and does this feed into general awareness? Anyways, I'm going to open the floor here in a second. Does anyone else have anything to add? I'm hearing crickets.
Could somebody pin the guide? It's up in the channel
Yeah,
now.
I got it.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no further comments on that, I'll just go on to. So at this point, we've kind of taught you some general knowledge stuff. This week, when you're meeting with your mentors and divvying up with them, it doesn't have to be tonight. Obviously, you're on their schedule when I release you from this. They're going to be peppering you with questions about general knowledge just to see what you know about your ship and what you know about your opponent's ships. And they could get some pretty tricky questions like, oh, what is the thickness of your side armor belt? What angle should you be at if you want to avoid a citadel from an incoming battleship? How much angle do you have to have with your light cruiser? You know, there's a great video by, what's his name? I can't remember it. But anyways, he shows how the Yamato can be deflected by a tier 1, you know, gunboat.
That was Flamu.
Yeah,
Flamu,
that's
there you go.
because a Minotaur said I was angled. He was angled.